Awesome. And we are live. Welcome to the Straight Talk Mind and Muscle podcast. Welcome to the Eat Well, Move Well radio show. Eric Davis, thank you so much for your patience. Thank you for coming on.
Oh, my absolute pleasure. Glad to be here.
It was nice just chatting with you then. You're a really interesting cat, Navy SEAL, but you've written a book that I am so excited to read. And the title just says it all, says it so well. Raising Men, Lessons Navy SEALs Learned from Their Training and Taught to Their Sons. What a phenomenal project, and such a positive way to, on a bunch of different fronts, for veterans to use positive lessons for their family, which a lot of us have a lot of, that seems to be an issue, transitioning from that military mindset. So can we get an idea about your journey into the military, and then through the military into transitioning, and then we'll go through your book, because this is going to be something that's really cool. I serve the veterans community. We all talk about our journey. We all have different journeys, but the transition into civilian life is always tough, it seems. It looks great. I mean, I'm chatting with you. You're successful. We talked about business a little bit there, but there's a journey to get there. So that's what I'd like to drill down on. So if you're okay, could you please share your military history, and then we'll transition into the book.
Sure, absolutely. So, when to kind of talk about my history, I got to back it up before I went in the military, because people need to know I certainly, to whatever extent I've had success, it just hasn't always been that way. What really went down is when I was about 15 years old, my dad, who is captain of the county sheriff's department in the county I lived in, he's the bishop of our church. All I wanted to be was like my dad. About 15, he got struck down with like clinical depression, Parkinson's disease. Several things happened at about 15. And how the story goes is, like, I was too young to be without a dad, but I was just old enough to know, like, man, I really need to have a father figure.
Yeah.
And so how the story goes is, again, I knew just enough. And I dove into personal development at that time. I learned, like, man, none of this stuff's really impacting me. It's not really working. So I was like, the only thing I thought I should do is what I thought was the obvious thing to do, is, like, I'm going to go become a Navy SEAL, and I'm going to learn about manhood, masculinity, how to perform, just like about life. And you start doing this thing. So that was the journey. So I went in very early. I actually turned 18 in boot camp. So child soldier for about half a month there. Went into boot camp, actually went to the MEP station where they do all the medical beforehand, failed the color vision test, called my recruiter, said, hey, they said I cannot be a SEAL. He said, go ahead and go in. If you pass the physical exam or the fitness test, they'll work with you. So I'm like, okay, I'm a 17-year-old kid. So I didn't learn yet how recruiters, they typically lie when they're speaking is what happens. But you know what? He's like, just go, man. And I'm like, not a bad idea. So I ended up in Marine reconnaissance as a medic for a few years. Just my whole, the world got detoured there. I actually have, so I'm color vision deficient, right? So I have actually passed the test 2 different times when I absolutely had to. The first time was in boot camp. That was the time I did not pass. So long story short, Marine reconnaissance, got out of the Navy. The quick story is, my nephew's best friend says, look, Mom, there's Eric Davis, the guy that was almost a Navy SEAL. And this is when I was out, and I was just, because I got out, I got out to go into business the first time, and it just like, man, the first lesson I'm going to teach my kids is not going to be to watch their father not follow or pursue his dreams. So I went back in.
Wow.
Yep. Went back in, passed the second color vision test, was a reservist when I went through SEAL training, and then I made it. And then boom, that's where the SEAL journey began. I'll pause right there, and we could go all kinds of different directions.
Oh, thank you. And how old were you when you left? Was that a few years later, the first time?
When I left the military, or
sorry, when you went out of Marine Recon, you went to business. What sort of age were you there?
Oh yeah, I would have been 18, 19, 21, 23, about 24, maybe 23, 24. So still pretty young. Already had 2 kids at that point. Oh yeah. So when you're talking about people making transitions, or
Yeah.
like the men I work with, when they're like, oh gee whiz, I can't because I have kids or this, that, or the other, like I can't go there with them, because I've done it 3-4 times with 4 kids even. So I already had 2 by then, very young.
It changes your outlook on life. I mean, I think I'm just going to do the math, 42 when our boy was born, and my direction was here, and suddenly, literally, the day he popped out, my direction is now here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. That's, it's one of those things, like when I teach ambition to people, we talk about defining what a good life looks like. And, when you're younger, special operations, special forces, whatever it is, it's like that cowboy phase of life. But then all of a sudden you're in your 30s or whatever, and you have kids and mortgages. And you're like, man, I don't know if this is a good idea anymore. I don't know if this is a good idea anymore.
I
So
see 2 types of people generally, and I'm sure you have you've got a bigger military than us. So you'd see a wider range, but I generally see 2 types of people in special operations, special forces. Is the majority, unfortunately, are single, or they're with a partner or with a wife, and it breaks up and they go down. I think you said cowboy. The job is it. The job is it.
Yep.
And there's the other ones that are very rare. They still hold it together. It was really interesting. Bob Keller interviewed him a while back. He talked about he seems like one of those guys. I remember one of my SALT sergeant in the team, same deal, but it's a very rare amount. But that seems to be what you've got. And the reason I asked you your age at that time, Eric, was, well, you're thinking, I don't want to pass those lessons on to my sons, which I thought was a very mature thing. So that's why I asked the age. But then you can see the maturity because you got 2 kids. You got a different importance. So I guess then, now you've gone back into the Navy, you're going to be a SEAL. How do you merge family and special operations life?
Yeah. So I talk about this in the book a little bit.
Great.
There's a quote. I'm not always fond of quotes because sometimes I think they can become like anesthesia for people, but I think it goes caught, not taught when you're talking about parenting. And I haven't read the book in a while, but I do remember talking about this. Is the idea is that it's very likely that your kids will follow your footsteps, or by the example you're setting, by the kind of life you're living.
Yeah.
So one of the things that was somewhat important to me when I was younger, but now, especially now that I train men, hundreds and then into the thousands, and I get to listen to all these guys, is what the world needs is people to be on fire. They need people to live a life of purpose and passion. So though I was gone and traveling a lot, that's what my kid, I have 3 daughters and 1 son, but we're talking about raising men. That's what my son saw. So even to this day, my son still sees me as this pioneer or this point man, this like dad is out there and he's an entrepreneur now. He's an author. He's doing all these things. And yeah, sometimes he's locked down with work, but it's not because he's like pinned. It's because dad's passionate and he's helping people. And I can see my son still want to follow me, maybe not necessarily in my exact footsteps, but he's like, that's what it looks like to live on purpose. That's what it's looked like when you're fired up about going to work. That's how it should look. And so many men, if not almost all of the ones I speak to, especially when I interview them, they don't live that life, right? They live joyless lives. They've lit no passion. Forget about it. If I do the financial math with them, it's not present to them that the millions and millions of dollars that they need to have acquired by age 60 so that they can live a dignified life after the time comes when they can no longer work. There's so much to it. So whether I'm in the SEAL teams or an entrepreneur or anything like that, for me, first and foremost, it's always been live life by an example. But I don't mean like a clever example. I don't mean like following the stereotypical definition of masculinity. I mean live life like a real man, where you define that which impacts your ability to live a good life. You calculate the amount of capacity required to care for that life now and the 25 plus years of old age when you can no longer work. And then you design and execute a set of conventional and unconventional strategies that allow you to actually make that life real. So that's what I want my son to see, whether I'm home every day or not. And I'm not saying anything bad about being home every day. There's something beautiful about that, but if what you're showing them is to be miserable and like drink every night and just sit on the couch, might be better if you weren't home. and doing something more amazing.
That's cool.
You know?
I think you said some amazing things. I can just unpack that a little bit as you teach your kids intent, which is brilliant, because it doesn't matter what you're doing, like you say, entrepreneur, SEAL, whatever, but it's the intent there. That's brilliant. And I love that. I live a life of purpose and passion. Well,
Oh yeah.
look, you know, on the show, I've interviewed tons of VCF guys, and we talk about their military journey in different ways. I don't tend to focus on the war stories, because you guys have all done that. We've done that on different shows. Brandon Webb connected us, which was phenomenal. Great guy to chat to. You guys, can you talk through the sniper program? Because for anybody that's not read or listened to Brandon's books about that, the old school military training seemed to be there for the sniper training for SEALs. Kick the ass, yell at the people who are not performing and make them perform worse. And Brandon totally revolutionized that, and that resonated with me, because I actually did some of that work back in my 20s, not about positivity, but positive reinforcement and visualization and so on. I believe you were a part of that, Eric. Is that correct?
Yeah, I was the part of it that allowed Brandon to say that he revolutionized it. I was the one that did it. Where's Brandon at? No, I'm messing with him. Yeah, Brandon and I work very well together. And yeah, I could definitely unpack the kind of process or performance through process in my mindset that I brought to the deal for sure.
I'd really like to do that, please, because I think, and the reason behind that is because that's going to lead into probably some of the reasoning intent behind your book as well. And actually just what I see in you, Eric, you're very positive, you're proactive, but you're also systems based. So let's unpack that story.
Sure. How do I do it? So I tend to think in formulas. I think in formulas, well, that's because I teach performance, right? And if we're going to move the needle in someone, you're going to, like we were chatting before, like you're going to have some sort of formula that you can abide by. So I would say one of the biggest things is Brandon talked about the mental management. Did he talk about the mental management when you guys were?
Yeah, a little bit. He did. We didn't delve into too much. I was looking at the whole journey of where he got from getting into the military to soft rep. So I'd really like to delve into the mental management and that positive side of things that you worked with.
Yeah. Okay. So how do I think it? So let me give you more of the engineer side of it, then I can bring me back to the mental management side of it for sure, because they really are one and the same. If you start on the mental side, you're going to push yourself to like engineering performance. And if you start on the engineering of performance, what you're going to do is develop a mental mindset that works, right? So here's what I found. So when somebody's trying to shoot, like say they're going to try to hit a head size moving target at 800 yards, which doesn't sound that crazy if you've been in the business. But then as I'm out of it for a few years, I'm like, geez, Louise, that's crazy.
Yeah.
That's an incredible shot. So what happens after about 500 yards, like if you're ever teaching civilians or hunters or anything like that, or SWAT teams, after about 500 yards, things start to feel magical to people because there's like, what's going on? Where's my bullet going, right? And what I'll explain to them is like, hey, here's what's going on. There's probably about 25, let's just say about 25 things that go into having that bullet impact the target. There could be plus or minus, but 25 is going to do a good job. And what's happening is you're missing the target, and you know what you know, right? You like, oh, the wind or this, that, or the other, whatever you know, that's what you're thinking about. But when there's 25 things, after about 400 or 500 yards, the smaller things, like maybe what you had for lunch, the Coriolis effect of the earth, the spin drift of the bullet, the idea that the wind's 10 miles an hour and you need to correct for it by this many minutes of angle, except for when you call 10 miles an hour, there's an adjustment because it might actually be 15. Like there's all these little subtleties. And that was the thing. I was like, none of those things by themselves are big enough to take you off target. None of those things by themselves are all that obvious. So what's happening is you have like this phantom existence behind you or in front of you, however you want to say it, that's pulling you off target, and you're completely unaware of it. Right. And I see the same thing with men when they're parenting. I see the same thing with men in business and entrepreneur. Like, why am I working harder every day and making less money? Why am I not multiplying my income while I'm dividing my effort? And what it is, it's like, well, there's some subtle strategies. There's some fundamentals at play that you're missing. And when it comes to mental management, like, well, when you take a shot, it's the self-talk you have prior to the shot, right? That's reinforcing your self-image and tapping into your subconscious and allowing you to concentrate on all the variables at the same time. So if you're that guy that takes a shot and goes, shit, I pulled my shot.
Yep.
That's probably one of the biggest, most impactful, subtle, artistic things happening in the background. So that's my entry point to what we did there.
It's perfect. It's a perfect start. And you're a very good storyteller. Now let's move on to these students turn up, your pass rate, when you guys did the course, that was pass rate and fail rate, you guys more than reversed that. I think you guys ended up with a 95% pass rate when students took your guys' course. Is that correct? Yeah,
it got really low, the failure rate, or the pass rate got really, really high. And I always like to remind people, this was with no reduction in standards. If anything, the standards went up. Yes. No increase in the amount of time we had to train these students. As a matter of fact, we added more things that I think we trained them in during this time, and no increase in time. So no decrease in standards, right? We didn't make the course any longer. We didn't, do anything like that. Mm-hmm. And the other thing I'd point to, as far as, everybody had their contribution. We are a team there, but I'm always talking about, my part. Is I remember when I first became an instructor, and we'd go to teach something, and I'd be like, is this the first time we'd ever taught this? Like, what's going on here? It's like, we're making this up every single time. And people are going, how is that even possible? SEALs are trained to such a high degree, XYZ. And I'm not saying that they're not, but what we have are extremely high standards. So the guys that make it are the ones who either just happen to just go down the right path, yep, or they are the ones who are able to figure it out, right? So we're still producing these really high level performers. But the thing is, it's like, well, we are losing guys who could have performed at that level, but either didn't go down the right path and they just chose a different way to think about it, or they weren't able to figure it out. Now, somebody could argue like, well, we want the guys who could figure it out. Like, well, then we would change training though. We would do that with intention. So what I started to do in sniper school, so whatever diagnosis you want to give me, but I need precision. I need precision and symmetry, and I need to be able to see things. So I started creating binders. So, and this is my entire platform of what I teach to men right now came from this very moment. This is the story. And what I did is I'd show up and we'd have course standards that these guys had to meet. And what I call those are positive intentions and negative intentions. So I'd like, okay, there are the measurable objectives. Any entrepreneur, anybody transitioning from military and business, like, listen up, because here's how it goes. And then what we do is have our training. Another way to put that would be a set of practices or standard operating practices. However you want, you can label those a few different things. And then what I would do is I would put them through the training. I would observe. I always say, watch the human. I would see what happens. And then I would stop, start, modify, manage, or maintain the training program until they started producing the measurable objectives. So what we had at the end was what I call performance through process. So I just developed what I call an expert at becoming an expert. And there's a way, it's a very simple formula. I can give it, there's two formulas I can give it if we want to go into it. That one goes identify, assess, prioritize, execute. And the other one is the Stalker's formula, purpose, action, information, debrief. Two things we might unpack as we go. But those are the two things that got spit out from my time. I'd actually make these guys little laminated cards to put in their pocket. Because I'm like, you guys can do it. You don't know what to do, when to do it. And we got to condition that for you. So I'll pause right there again, because we can go so many different directions.
I interview passionate people, and Eric, I do say, it's not just SF guys, it's scientists, it's coaches. I interviewed one of the All Blacks performance coaches the other day. I interview the best people in the world at what they do, and they're passionate because of that. And your passion comes across so well. I write fast, and I say to people when I lecture, I talk fast, so you better listen fast, but I'm going to have to write those things down really well, those two things to unpack. Brilliant. That's yeah, just before we unpack that, I wanted to paint the picture for the listener or the viewer. When the students are coming to your course, your sniper course, these are professional SEALs, or professional special forces operators, and they're coming to do another course for another skill set, which is the ones that you instruct on, Eric. And they are experts already. They're just learning another skill. So to let them fall by the wayside through poor teaching or coaching is a waste. So yes, let's unpack those two. What do you even call them, Eric? Those two cards that you gave them.
Oh, so I always refer to these kind of things as standard operating practices.
I like that.
Yeah. You can call them strategies. There's lots of different words for it. And I think it's important to use all the words actually, so somebody in business hears the word strategy or a measurable objective or a key performance indicator, like it's all the fundamental. Here's the thing, fundamentally, it's all the same thing. That's how I was able to succeed when I got out. I went to a large financial firm. I go, hey, training sales teams and sniper teams fundamentally is the same thing. And they're like, they bought it and it worked. So fundamentally, it's the same. It's not rocket surgery, right? It's just, it is this persistent, consistent application with the intent to fulfill an objective that does it. Now, there's a way we can do it that makes it hyper efficient and meaningful to your entire life, because we can get good at something and break something else if we're not careful. So yeah, I call them standard operating practices, but they have to be in a sequence for them to work. What
was the first one you went through? The ended in execute.
So I would say when I started doing the binders, that's where I came up with this idea of identify, assess, prioritize by power, and execute. And what that means, when I say identify, that story where I said, hey, there's like 25 things that are going to impact the bullet. So whatever it is you're talking about, like, we'll identify the parts of a thing. This is actually how you generate philosophy. So philosophy to understand the nature and operations of a thing. So it's so funny, like if I were teaching you and I could put you in front of a guru, you can listen all day long, but if you don't have a philosophy to apply that in your life, you're not going to get anywhere. But if you have a philosophy, or if you have an approach that'll self-generate philosophy, you don't even need new information. You could actually just iterate on this thing and you're going to get there. So identifies to understand the parts of a thing. So like when I teach this, when I left, I taught all the parts of life. There's about a dozen parts of life. Everybody wants to live a good life, but that's the same thing. They're like, man, why does my life suck? Why is it getting harder? Why are all these things going wrong? It's like, well, you haven't even identified the parts of life. Just like the sniper hasn't identified the 25 things.
Yeah.
Right. And then you make an assessment like, okay, well, where are they? Where I shoot my bullet, like where did it land in relatively speaking, or compared to the bullseye? Right. So we can make an assessment here and say, okay, there's a gap. Identify, assess, and like, okay, well, what are the things I need to do, right, to fix the gap? Well, you can't do everything. So we call it prioritize by power, or I call it prioritize by power. And what that means is, what is the one thing that if I got handled would positively ripple across as many other things as possible in a way that'll produce a return on the time, energy, and creativity that I put into that thing. So it's kind of an obscure jump, but I can shoot a shot, miss my target, and like, oh, okay, well, what is the one thing I'm going to do? Am I going to deal with my body position, my breathing? Am I going to make a correction on my scope or where I'm holding? And sometimes it's not like one shot, one kill, especially in sniper school. Sometimes it might be 2 shots, 1 third hit. Or what you're trying to do is accumulate points, and you're demonstrating that you can correct onto target. Right. And then obviously when you're really good at it, you can get it the first time. But then we prioritize by power and say, okay, well, what is the one thing? And sometimes I'm like, hey, shoot low left off the target. It's like, let's do something just like so clear that whatever happens next, we'll now know for sure what needs to be done to hit the target for rounds 2 and 3, or excuse me, for 3 and 4.
Can I interject? It was a story from one of the snipers in one of Brandon's books. I'm sorry to refer to that, but because he literally had the stories in one of the books, it was interesting because it was a different viewpoint. And I remember this guy was in Afghan or Iraq, I think, and he had to make a shot on a guy to save other guys. and he shot, and he had no idea where it was, literally none. And this is relevant to anyone listening, civilian or military. He realized he had no idea what his sight was aimed at. So he aimed at a huge building to stop and re-sight his weapon in the middle of a battle, re-sight his weapon on a huge water tower, and he got that and then re-sight his weapon. So it's important, so important. If you don't identify, which is the first thing you said there, Eric, is if you don't identify it, how do you know where the hell you're going? And you sometimes you have to take that pause, because you can't just keep going down a bad route and let it snowball worse and worse. You've got to stop, reassess, and re-identify. So I love what you've got there for your standing operating practice.
Yeah, absolutely. He's assessing, then he's prioritizing by power. And he's like, well, the one thing I can do right now is figure out where my bullet is impacting in relation to my center, to my bullseye. You know what I mean? To the center of my scope. And that's what he did. And that's what's called being an expert, at becoming an expert. That's what allows you to see. Here's the thing. I'm so glad you pulled that thing out, right? So many guys, fathers, men, executives, you name it, they just keep doing the same thing over and over. They keep shooting and like, I'm freaking missing over and over again. Yeah. And it's more than the whole thing, like, oh, to keep doing the same thing and expect something different, being crazy. It's not. It's like, it'll drive you crazy. It'll drive you mad. It'll produce stress, anxiety, break your self-confidence. It'll wear you down. Like, there's nothing worse than trying really hard to do something that's really, really important and not making any progress. And the thing is, they just don't have any resources. They don't have formulas like that. They don't have an approach that says, hey, dude, it's okay. You missed. Aim at the building. Pay attention, deep breath. Here we go. Now you got it. Looks like you're impacting a foot off to the right, aim to the left of that dude's head, drop them. Yeah. Right? They don't have it. It's so applicable. It is so applicable to men, especially nowadays. So important.
So prioritize by power and then execute. And that, as you're listening, I'm translating this into my head into parenting. I'm translating in my head for business, because we're not on the gun anymore. And I hope that everybody else is as well. There was the other card, if you will, or flashcard that you had of the other words and on that standing operating practice. What were they?
Yeah, that's purpose, action, information, debrief. And I hate the acronym that it turns out to be paid, but I couldn't change it. So the last bit on the identify, assess, prioritize, by power, and execute, just to finish it, it's execute and evolve, which is to our point. Oh. So that's what he did. He was executing and evolving, right? So when we go to do something, I've written some articles on this, but we don't take action necessarily solely just to hit our target. Sometimes we take action to gain information. And when you execute and evolve, the scientific term is called recurrence, which means you revisit your intentions. Like, all right, here are my intentions. And then I look at my practices or my strategies, and I stop, start, modify, manage, or maintain them until I fulfill my intentions. And that, if guys walked away with nothing else, any business right there. Now, I'm not saying you can just do that, but if you hold that, you can do anything with just a reasonable amount of intelligence. Like, there's a certain IQ that's not even that high, that once you hit it, doesn't even impact your ability to actually succeed, right? It's more about being able to learn quicker. So that's the one. So I could jump to the paid one for the stalkers, for the stalking.
Yeah, thank you. That's really clever. Sorry, I interrupted with the execute and evolve. And I think you're right. Life isn't always that complex, but those clever people, and I say clever not in an IQ way, not in a mathematician way, they see, I throw the ball here, it misses the target, I'm now going to do this. So you're going to reorientate. Yeah, let's go through the paid. This is interesting little acronym there.
Yeah, so it's a different angle. We're going to come back. This is at the same, it's called recursion rate. We're going to come back at the same problem from a different angle. So I would see there was a big Army Ranger dude, awesome guy, but he was going through the course because he was going to be an instructor there. So he had to go through the course. And he was struggling, but we'd start the stock and he would be at the starting line forever. Right. And he just wouldn't move. And I see other guys do the same thing. They get frozen or locked on to their current strategy. Right. That'll sound familiar to a whole bunch of men right now. And they're just like, I'm locked on, I got to do this. And then they would run out of time and they would fail. And so I'm like, look, here's how the breakdown goes. It's purpose, action, information, debrief. So first thing is establish your purpose. Now we're back to intention. We're back to measurable objectives. People like goals, and I don't like the word goals because that just sounds like something I'm going to miss. I like the word promises. And you call them what you will, but it's like we have an objective. Now in this particular scenario, you have two highly trained sniper instructors who have thousands of hours on the best binos in the world, sitting on the back, elevated on the back of a pickup truck looking for you. But the first thing is to establish your purpose. What we mean by that is find the OP, the observation point, the place where your target is. And once you find it, you never lose it. Now in entrepreneur or executive world or any other world, actually, this is called ambition. Like there is where I'm going, and it directs all thought, all focuses, and all action. It's what produces velocity and direction. It is everything. Without it, you are literally just bebopping around in the sea. So it starts off purpose. So now I bring up this thing called action. I'm like, man, you've got to move. And they're like, I don't know which way to go. And I'm like, I know. You're in a competitive and dynamic environment. There is no way to go. See, when people want the way to go, they're looking for an algebraic formula, right? And what this is, it's a heuristic situation, which means you have to basically invent your way. Now, this purpose, action, information, debrief, that's a fundamental formula that'll allow you to spit out heuristic formulas. But what I mean by that, algorithmic is like, it's already there for you. Like you just rinse and repeat. And those are the things that we outsource, by the way. This is, I got to think of the name, Daniel Pink wrote about this. I can't think of the name of the book, but that's what gets outsourced. That's why people are losing their job. Heuristic are the things that we have to invent and design all the time, and that cannot be outsourced. And by the way, if you're in an algorithmic situation or a job, that is why you continuously have to work more and get paid less, is because it's being taken from you. Anyway, action. So action isn't just to get to the target. When you move down the field, if I were to draw this out for you, I would draw this for guys like, hey, if you move down the field, what do you now? And that's not the way. You, for one thing, the minimum thing you can learn is what doesn't work, right? Yes. And then the next thing is like, well, did you get a different perspective? Were you able to look down the field left and right? Did you see any other possibilities, any dead space, any cover, any concealment? Did you see any other students? This is the common thing. I'd be like, you're crawling, you're like, and you're just like, sweating. It's in the desert. You're an hour and a half, like, oh my God, what's happening to me? And then you look over and then some dude just walks and you're just like, you're like, I can't, what? You know what I mean? Like, I can't. Yeah. So you're like, okay, well, I'm going to back up, move over and just walk down that path. So you're going to have a different perspective. And know what else you're going to do? You're going to meet people who are further along than you are, like the guy walking by, people who have figured other things out. Right? You're not out there stalking by yourself. It would be foolish not to use every data point around you. So that's action. So we can collect more information, hold it up against our purpose, see what's weak, missing, incomplete, or flawed, see like what is missing, and then that's our information part, right? And then we debrief like, okay, well, I'm stuck here. I can't move. That guy just walked by me. Let me debrief. Now you can debrief with yourself, and that has some impact. And on a stalking field, you basically have to, because you are alone as far as that goes. But out in the world, it would be foolish to debrief. That's why people need to operate in tribes, right? Like you need to operate in tribes. So you have other people who are protecting and progressing the current and future situation of each member of the tribe. So you can debrief with others, and you can really hyper accelerate. That's purpose, action, information, debrief. It would be the way, the basic underlying cause of why this business I run right now, that started just months before COVID, had an investor completely bail right when COVID hit because he got scared, and I don't blame him at all. And then why we're now thriving in less than 2 years. It's that formula. And there's obviously some details to execute a formula like that, but that's it. And that came from teaching people stalking, how to stalk a target.
Wow. Again, it just comes down to intent for me. You're obviously incredibly intelligent guy, Eric, as well as you've got applicable knowledge. But people, they paint a picture of the military, and they don't realize when the boss says, here guys, I need to go do this, and it's the intent. It's our job to figure out the how. He just says the intent there, and that's definitely what you and the people who developed your program figured out, is you gotta see the target, and then that's the intent, is to hit the target. You started the conversation about how many, you said a line there, how many millions of dollars you need to have accumulated by X age to have a respectful life. I think that was the word you used. But when we talked about business a little bit, when transitioning on to business, I was stunned to hear you need to have a target. You need to know what the hell you're aiming at for income, or whatever your other target is. But just everything you said comes down to intent and purpose, same sort of thing. What are you trying to achieve? You've painted an awesome picture of some things you did with the sniper school, and that's shows and shows of her unpacking that totally. I'd like to now, because you paint a picture so well of your processes, how did you go into writing this book? And let's talk about the book of raising boys, because you've really painted a picture, not of the G.I. Jane sort of instructors of Navy SEALs. You taught a clever picture of real men. Now let's talk about raising boys.
Yep. Let's do it. Where do you want me to just bring the applicability over? How do we want to go? Which way do you want to go?
Thank you. Great question. Tell us about the book is the easiest way. Tell us about the book. What's it about? What are the lessons? I mean, looking at the title, you'd go, well, am I going to teach my 4-year-old boy how to pull a trigger on an MP5? No, I'm going to teach him other lessons. Those lessons that Special Forces guys and everybody else can progress forward to raise good humans.
I would say the book is like, the book had a whole lot to do with is taking applicable lessons, right? That I'm like, wow, I'm learning these, I'm developing these formulas, I'm figuring things out, things like that. And the book is like the beginning of the journey. So like book number 2, what's coming up next is like, I have no idea what the name is going to be. My son was like, how about Raised by Men? I'm like, oh, that's pretty good, man.
Wow.
But we're heading in that direction. So the best thing I could say about the book is it's a great place to start, to be like, okay, let me understand how I can start seeing things differently. Let me understand how this guy took experiences from being a SEAL and a sniper. I mean, really, that's what I was. I was a sniper instructor. I've done operations and stuff like that, but that was the thing. That was my time in life, right? And what you'd see is like the beginning, it's like the origin story of like, well, how did this guy parlay? I remember when I was in boot camp, right? And I was like, the fitness test. Remember that story, right? And I'm like, okay, I took the test, and not only did they not work with me, but I was the only guy. I was the only guy out of like 14, 15 people who passed the test, right? And I remember people then saying like, well, they start making up their stories, like, well, they're going to go do something else. Like, you can't really make it. How are you going to make money ever being a SEAL anyway? And stuff like that. And I was like, I'm not totally sure yet. I'm only 17 or just turning 18, but I'm pretty sure it's going to get some people's attention.
Yeah.
So it's like this origin story. And that's what I was always doing. I was like, okay, I'm going to get really good at something. And then I know it's going to do something, moving forward. I'm going to be able to apply it. So that's really what the book is about. It as a whole, it's just as much about me figuring out manhood. It's the origin story. It brought me to where I am right here today. I can give you I can tell you right now the formula for defining masculinity for yourself. I can give you the formula for defining purpose. I can give you a very operational formula of what actual passion is. And that's what the book is. The book is the origin story of all that. It's very useful. It's very applicable. We get a ton of great reports. People are improving their lives from it for sure, but it's like just the beginning.
Oh man, I'm excited. You're the second, probably I've interviewed a lot of authors, but second author of a book that I want to read. I interviewed Dr. Dan Pronk. He was this Australian Special Air Service doctor. But interestingly enough, not like the doctors you had in your unit, apart from Kirk Parsley, if you knew him, he actually went and did selection. So same as your buds and Hell Week sort of thing. He went and put himself through that and passed it. So he speaks our language, and he wrote a phenomenal book called Resilience. And again, unpacking all the things he learned in the special forces, and then applying it for men. You said something there about formula for masculinity, that, without giving away all the secrets of your book, because I'm going to be reading it, and so is everybody else that listens to this. What's the formula for masculinity, please?
Yeah, so this actually won't be in the book. So that's when I refer to the book. That's why I'm saying it's an origin, like almost like an origin story if you're watching it. Because if what I teach now, if someone's like, how the heck did you come up with that? I'm like, well, that's where it started. But I could say it's one and the same as purpose. So
right.
Here's the formula for defining purpose. So purpose or masculinity is to identify or define that which impacts your ability to live a good life. Like I said, scientifically speaking, there's a little over a dozen parts of life, and some of them are obvious, like body, spirituality, helping others, and some of them aren't so obvious, like career and work and different things like that. But this is masculinity. Here's my thing with masculinity too, is when I go on the news, when some idiot shoots something up or does something terrible, they're like, Eric, what's going on? I'm like, well, here's the problem with masculinity right now. Masculinity is defined by culture. There's problem number one. There's problem number one. And the bigger problem is there's really only one or two definitions of masculinity. Like right now, we got complete tough guy, bash your head in, or we got skinny latte, the way the other side. But the thing is, we're not bred like that anymore. Right? It'd be like training a Belgian Malinois, which is an attack dog that they use in the SEAL teams and in law enforcement, like a French poodle or like a puggle bull or something like that. There are more breeds now, right?
Yeah.
A renaissance has occurred. A whole new industrial revolution happened 40 years ago. Like the world has changed and we actually breed differently. Right. So first it was like, okay, the women were going to breed with the guys who can crush skulls and bring home deer meat. Which is fantastic skill, but it's not the only skill men have now. Right now, we're competitors in the marketplace. We're artists. There's all kinds. We got to be very creative. All kinds of different things. So one of the problems is like all these men out there, they're looking for something because they know it doesn't work. They're working. The people are still working more than 8 hours a day, some 10, 12, 13 hours a day. They're not earning enough money. They're not getting any respect from anybody. Like you can see that on the internet all over the place now. And the problem is they're trying to live somebody else's definition of masculinity. So when I talk about the formula for it, what true manhood is to me, and womanhood too, is to identify that which impacts your ability to live a good life. Right now, fundamentally, scientifically speaking, we have the same concerns, but the standards of those concerns, the color of those concerns, the size of house, the type of car, whatever it is, that needs to be defined by you. The least manly thing you can do is get the definition of who you are by popular culture or by someone else, if you think about it. Like if you want to talk manly would be like you defined it. Now, with purpose and masculinity, then the next thing is you can actually calculate the amount of capacity that's required to care for those concerns, to produce or care for those concerns, relationships with your body, relationships with your family, relationships with your finances, your ability to help other people, right? You can calculate that, right? Which is called money in that context. When I say money, I don't mean like dollars and Ferraris and all the stupid things we do. I mean money like wealth, like the old English definition, well-being. So you can actually calculate the amount of money that's required to care for those concerns now. And you're going to hear me say this all the time, and the 25 plus years of old age, because you want to talk about a pandemic. Like it's like only a small percentage of the population is even thinking about that. And even a smaller percentage of the population is actually setting money aside for that because, corporations don't do that for you anymore. Pensions went away, right? So that's purpose. That's how you define masculinity. Then passion comes after that, but that's being a man. And then,
it's being a good person.
It's being a whole and complete human. You can call it what you will, but you want to talk about like resiliency or a different grit, anything like that. Like, well, you want to get down with something like clarify what it is you're after producing. Now, real quick, I can go on forever, but there's 4 sources of figuring this out. Self, your culture, and that's the problem. Everyone's using self and culture, or you can do it with the tribe. And I don't mean drinking buddies or fantasy football. I mean like a real live group of people who are after the same thing you are, or spirituality. Now, when I say spirituality, some people want to call it the universe. Some people like calling it God, or spirituality could be nothingness. It's okay, but it is a 4th source. But I want to add something because I'm a God guy. So when I determine my purpose, that which impacts my ability to live a good life, right? Like what makes a good life, and I assess the standards and criteria that make each thing good or bad. If I do that with God, like that's how I do it. People can do it how they do. I'm literally sitting here like, why I'm passionate. I'm like, that is my purpose from God. And here's the really cool thing. When you calculate the amount of money that you need to produce in a year, plus what you need to save to fulfill that purpose, I literally walk away with like, well, that's what God wants me to do. He wants me to produce that amount of money, which sounds a little bit, everyone hold on, nobody turn it off right now. But then you have to ask yourself, how do you make money? And how you make money, fundamentally speaking, is by helping other human beings. So you want to talk about any word you want to use to keep yourself going, this will do it. Because once you understand that you make money by helping other human beings, you are, and if you did it from a spiritual perspective, you're like, wow, God has commanded me to produce this much help to other human beings every year after year after year. That is my life mission. That is my purpose. And that to me is masculinity, good person, a whole and complete human, whatever you want to call it. And you can sift through all the bullshit on the interweb now, because if it doesn't progress that that mission, you know, you don't need it. Sorry, I just went on a whole rant right there.
You know, 10 minutes ago, I said you're passionate. I love interviewing passionate people because it comes from that, almost that part, that quote where I don't know if Tony Robbins said it, John Keogh, all the sort of people, you know, if you truly love what you do every day, it's not work. And you step that up a little bit of, you know, to make money, you just really need to help others. And you combine those 2 things and yeah, you have a higher sense of purpose. I can see that, Eric.
You know, what's cool is people are like, when I do the math, because you keep hearing me say this 25 plus years.
Yeah.
So I do the math with people I work with, like, I'm going to stick it to you. And it hurts. People are like, oh, 100%. When you actually do that math, it's simple math, basic algebra, right? You can Google it, you'll figure it out. And what I like about doing, I'm like, I'm sorry I just did that to you. I'm sorry, like not sorry, because it's like if you had cancer, when would you want to know? I go, but the one thing I know, unless you're going to totally put your head in the sand or you think I'm blowing smoke, which is not me, it's just math. The one thing I know you're going to have to do right now is you're going to have to help people more. And I love that about what I do. And then the next best thing is like, Eric, how the hell am I going to triple my, because they do the math. It's like, they got to triple, quadruple, you know, it's a thing. Yeah. Because they don't teach this in school, and they certainly aren't going to talk about it on the news, because if the news got you scared about your money, you wouldn't buy all their stuff, right? That they're selling on the commercials. So here's the cool thing. We don't help people better by working more hours or harder. We help people better by understanding. Remember, I said there's a dozen or so concerns. There's 13 human concerns, 14 marriage, 22 business. Wow. 6 financial. Like, you can really, how you help people is you really understand what a human needs, and you help people care for those concerns too. And it doesn't mean more hours. It's the beauty. The world has changed. We don't go to factories anymore. It's not, you don't double incomes by doubling hours. Most people are already working their asses off. It ain't going to work. What we do is we get better at helping people. And a lot of times we just get better at understanding the actual value we are to other humans. And that helps too. Okay.
That is self-belief, which is what you guys changed in the sniper program, self-belief. We'll go on to that. I'm going to interject slightly here for the listener. averagefrog.com, punch that into your web browser, averagefrog.com. It'll flick over and redirect to, I think it's ericdavis215.com. So jump on that. We'll put in the show notes as well, of course. Where was I talking then?
Interject for the listener.
Yeah, I'll come back to that. But what I wanted to progress onto now, because, you know, when we connected, I wanted to talk about your book. It jumped out at me. It's phenomenal. But I love organically learning about a guest. And that's what we're doing. You know, we know our backgrounds a little bit, but what do you do now, Eric, for the listener? Because you're obviously on a completely expanded journey from writing the book as an author. In the last 2 years, you launched a business. Can you please talk to the listeners about that? Because I'm excited about it, listening to you.
Yeah, for sure. Like about kind of like what I do, you mean on this side?
Yeah. So you talked about reaching thousands of guys and coaching them. And we talked about masculinity, but then that translated off to really it applies to all sexes. So what do you do now helping others? Outline it for us. Got
it. Yeah. So at the base, like the pitch or not the pitch, but like the thing, right, that you'd see you'd see it on the website when I update the website. On the homepage of the website for people, there is a webinar. It's free, and you'll learn about the identify, assess, prioritize, execute. Like you could walk away with that thing, like you could do it. Yeah. So that's what's front and center on the website. But really, at the core, what we do is we help people identify their purpose, use their passion to fulfill their purpose, and do it in a way that allows them to survive, adapt to change, and generate wealth. And again, guys, I'm not silly about wealth. I mean just whole and complete well-being, right? So that they can live what they say is a good life, definition of masculinity, in a way that allows them to lead others to do the same. One, there's some love in that. Like, what's the point? I do in a webinar and somebody's like, nobody needs that much money, Eric. And I'm like, well, you're close. You're a little low. He's like, you only need this much money. I'm like, yeah, you're a little low on that, but I can go with you on that one. But that's true. If what you wanted to do is get out of this thing and having helped yourself, but it's like, what's the why? What, just die now. What's the purpose? You know what I mean? I mean, if we left this planet let's just try to leave it as a net zero. We didn't hurt it and we didn't help it. That's a pretty big bar by itself, right? But if we didn't help other human beings, if we didn't go through something in a way that allowed them to get there faster, what would be the purpose? So that's ultimately what we do. And at the core, there is a fundamental strategy. It's 12 intentions. They need to happen in sequence. They need to get, the intentions of each piece needs to get produced, right? Today, what we were talking about is number one, a whole bunch about number one, which is ambition, right? Purpose. And that's where it all starts, obviously. But what we do is we train people how to master this strategy. This was my mentors. I just happened to go learn with the right people at the right time when I left the teams. And what we do is train them to master that thing, which is proven to have people earn, save, and invest enough to survive, be free, live a good life in this competitive and dynamic marketplace that we live in. Here's the thing. It doesn't stop moving anymore. Right now, there are globally connected teams working together right now to design new offers, new narratives, new strategies that are going to disrupt and make yours obsolete. Now, they're not trying to hurt you. They don't care about you. There are just groups of people who are already living this good life. They're taking care of their life and their finances and their business. And how they need to do that is by continuously developing new offers, right? And here's the other thing too, for parents. When we talk to our kids, do you know who we're being compared against? Have you ever seen TikTok? Yeah. Have you ever got on Instagram reel? Like, they're geniuses. I'm like, how? These people are amazing. And guess what, dad or mom? When you pull open your kid's door and start, but they're watching TikTok. When you talk about competition, I'm not talking about just your marketplace. You're competing with the talent on TikTok or those Instagram reels. It's incredible talent. These guys are doing quadruple backflips, or you hear someone talk like a Jordan Peterson or a Joe Rogan or who's our guy? Jocko. He's hardcore. Jocko, and then another one. He's so much. I just listened to him the other day. You Can't Hurt Me. Goggins. Oh, Goggins. Yeah. Parents, dads. That's who they're listening to. You know what I'm saying? So anyway, that's what we do. We teach a fundamental strategy that, when executed in sequence, really the way I like to speak it is what people do, what men do is they give everything to their career and their leftovers of time, money, energy, and creativity. Their life gets stuck into whatever's left over after career, and that doesn't work. So basically this fundamental strategy, we flip that. We design life and then reconstruct or redesign careers that actually serve life. And the trick is your career and the way you generate the very money that you need to care for your life you can't break any part of your life, because that's the whole point. And guess what? What's also cool is any part of your life, kids, soccer, relation, anything can't break your ability to generate that money. And that's the pivot. We call it tactical pivot. That's all I do. All I do all day, every day. I wake up, I study scripture, I study that, I write about it, I teach it, and then I loop it over and over again because I believe it's the answer.
Exactly. Belief, self-belief. It's phenomenal. It really is. And you say so much. For me to unpack it as an interviewer, it's a little tough, but
yeah, sorry, man.
it's a good thing. It really is.
Yeah.
I remember the CEO of New Zealand SAS Group stood up in front of us one time in front of this, I think it's squadron or unit, I'm not sure, but he said, you know, if we're not thinking 10, 15 years ahead, if we're not moving, if we're standing still, we're actually going backwards because everybody else is progressing. An example there of a special forces commander realizing that everybody else is still working hard around them. Same thing you just said. You know, you're thinking about designing this push bike. Somebody else is out there designing an electric bike. They're going to surpass you. You know, it's true. And the reason I brought that up is every time you've said something there, you've talked about how you applied special forces principles, all the cool things we learn, which is not the picture people think we are, to civilian life, and to be, more importantly, Eric, to living a good life as a good person. I wanted to ask you one sort of last question to tie it in a knot. How the hell did you learn this stuff? Because you've said some things that you didn't learn in the SEALs. You talked about philosophy and then how humans put together. How the hell did you learn all this stuff? It's very diverse.
So I would say in the SEAL teams and special forces, whatever we're in, right? All we know is to train. To your point, if we don't innovate, we die. So when I was leaving the teams, it was 2008, one of the worst economies ever, and I was going to become an entrepreneur. 16 years into the Navy. I was 3 years, 10 months away from retirement when I did this. 4 kids, 2 houses in South Orange County. Also, I'm not saying, oh, look, I had 2 houses. I'm saying, oh, God bless, I had 2 houses to pay for. I'm just saying it was no joke, right? And all I knew, so I didn't know I was going into such a hyper dynamic and competitive environment. I didn't know that the stakes were much higher. You can fail a mission. I'm not saying people don't die and it's horrible, but you can fail lots of missions and you still get paid. You still get your pension. Everybody, you know what I mean? People get to eat, but out in this world, you fail, that means you're dead. Yep. It might take a little longer. I get that. So that's all I knew. And then the second part was luck. I just happened to find mentors and teachers that taught me art, science, philosophy, and engineering in the context of business and life.
Wow.
And I've nonstop. So there's people out there that don't study every day. And that would be like a special forces unit or a SEAL unit, not training every day. I remember in Afghanistan watching the admiral run around with a pistol in his hand. He's like, he's still jogging. We still work out when we're in war zones. You know what I'm saying? And so that's all I knew. So that's what I came across. And then I trained with those people who became my mentors, the only people I consider mentors. And I would describe this training people. I'm like, it makes anything I did in the SEAL teams look like almost like easy. I'm like, this stuff to understand philosophy and the application, like you can, hopefully people can hear me. Like that sounds like I'm applying that stuff. I no kidding could pull up a set of strategies that are all designed with that in mind. And not because I'm so great, it's just they banged it into me. So that's how I learned about it. So I studied all the time, but it's not why the reason I say lucky is because I stopped studying with them for a few years and it was like being famished. You look up all the resources out there. This stuff, what I studied was what we would consider uncommon knowledge. Like you ain't going to find it. Any stuff I'm talking about, that fundamental strategy, this is uncommon knowledge. This is like this would be like any of our units. Like this is how we train.
Yeah.
These are our tactics. And it's like, you just don't find it out there.
No.
Yeah.
Man, it's just phenomenal listening to you. I could really do that all day. I'm off to your website after this, and I'm excited to read your book. And what thank you for opening my eyes to the work you do, because I obviously got you on board as an author of this book for this one specific thing, but really you've opened up that Pandora's box for people to be better, men, women, for, parents. It's brilliant. And readjusting. I think you're serving people very, very well. Averagefrog.com we talked about, redirects to your current website. Brilliant. The book, I think when I was looking, it was on Amazon, Raising Men, Lessons Navy SEALs Learned from their training and taught to their sons. Is there anything final that you'd like to leave with the viewer and listener, Eric?
If they go on the website, do that free webinar. There at the end of the webinar, there's offers for you could join training if you'd like or don't. They'll be on my email list. And I really work to care for people on my email list, whether they end up being customers or not. I'm always just thinking about how can I help people? How can I help people? Yeah. And I would just if I could do anything is especially for the men out there, is if we can just talk about belief, right? Like there is a better way. Yeah. There is a way to live a good life now and later. There is a way to take care of your body, relationships, helping others, and earn a living. Like it's not a yes, but, you know what I mean? It's like a yes, and like I can care for my life and generate the amount of wealth I need to care for it for the long term. Just believe there's a better way.
And that's awesome. You're a shining light. Well, look, Eric, I'm gonna wrap it up there. I think we've got so much good information that people can go away with that they haven't been overwhelmed with in this show. Phenomenal to hear your work. Thank you so much for your time, and it's been a real pleasure.
My pleasure, man. Thank you so much. You're fantastic. I really enjoyed being on. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Brilliant. Cheers, Eric.